Lundy Island, a place of peace and tranquility where its wealth of wildlife and stunning scenery attracts visitors from all around the world all year round. But with plans for a new offshore wind farm named the Atlantic Array, the unique wildlife and natural beauty of Lundy could be in jeopardy. My name is Rebecca Koenig, and I've come here to Lundy Island to ask the people of Lundy if plans are approved for this wind farm, how will it affect their beloved island, their business and their home. One of Lundy's distinctive features is its marine conservation zone. This zone, the first of its kind in the UK, was set up to protect and preserve the special wildlife, flora and habitats that are of special geological interest. A marine conservation zone is looked after by the Marine Management Organisation. They can implement laws to further the conservation and protection of these zones. These bylaws stop anything which may interfere with the seabed, damage or disturb anything in the marine conservation zone. In order to understand why Lundy was designated a marine conservation zone, I've come here to Lundy's landing bay to see the marine wildlife that they try so hard to protect.
So we're in the heart of the marine conservation zone. The no tank zone, which is the real kind of heart of the whole thing, is on the east side of the island. The no tank zone stretches about a kilometre off our eastern shores, and within that zone nobody's allowed to remove anything from the islands, from the sea. So no tanking of lobsters, no fishing, either commercial or recreational. Although this was had mixed reactions at the time, it's actually proving very good for especially things like the lobsters. We're getting much larger lobsters and more landable lobsters within this zone. And because these animals are territorial, as they get bigger, they're pushing other large lobsters out of the no-tank zone, and now they're repopulating the areas around Lundy itself. So we're getting a lot of the local potters now seeing the benefits of the no-take zone. So very, very positive benefits now we're having.
As well as the no-take zone, the Marine Conservation Zone also brings in a lot of other wildlife too.
This is the largest seabird colony on Lundy. We've got around 3,000 guillemots breed on the island, and this is them resting on the ledges behind us. And then around 1,000 pairs of razorbills and about 400 pairs of kittiwakes. The razorbills nest just on these ledges. They don't actually build nests, they just lay their eggs straight onto the rock face, onto these small ledges. And they have the smallest territory of any bird in the UK. They defend about 20 centimetre territory. We also have puffins in here. This is probably the heart of our puffin colonies, up on the top of the cliffs up here. Fairly small numbers still. We've got about 27 pairs of them nest on the island. We got down to 5 individuals in 2007 due to problems with rats on the island. But now, since we've eradicated rats from the island, the population is recovering very nicely.
After speaking to Darren, it was clear to see the benefits of having a conservation zone to protect the marine environment. And whilst I only saw the shores of Lundy Island, the marine animals and their habitats are protected up to 12 nautical miles. But there's a problem. The Atlantic Array wind farm, built up of 278 wind turbines and stretching over a distance of 238 kilometres squared, is planned to be built in the middle of Lundy's Marine Conservation Zone. In order to find out how these plans would affect the Marine Conservation Zone and Lundy, I spoke to Derek Green, Lundy's General Manager. What does your job as General Manager of Lundy involve?
My job entails running the island on a day-to-day basis, looking after the ship and making sure it runs regularly to bring people across, and also all the administration of the island on behalf of the Landmark Trust.
Would you say that there's a lot involved in your job to do with preservation of wildlife and conservation?
Absolutely. Lundy is a very important place for wildlife and conservation, and it's been recognised as such because it's been designated as a SSSI, which is a site of special scientific interest because of the features that it has here. So we've got quite spectacular flora and fauna and wildlife here, and we get some things here that you don't particularly find in other areas across the UK. things like the Lundy cabbage, which are endemic to the island, so you don't find them anywhere. And in terms of seabirds, it's one of the most important seabird nesting sites as birds migrate north and south at both ends of the year. Because of our location in the Bristol Channel here, just at the edge of the Atlantic, we're fortunate enough just to catch the edge of the Gulf Stream. So we get nutrient-rich, warmer waters coming up and bathing both sides of the island. And because of that, we get some quite rare species which you possibly wouldn't find in other areas in the UK here. So there's lots of different habitats around the island underneath the water, creating, you know, places for these quite rare species to survive. So lots of conservation work going on and lots to look after.
When did you first find out about the Atlantic Array wind farm plans, and how did you react?
The Bristol Channel has been long known to have a large tidal drop, and we always thought that perhaps one day that somebody would harness that energy because it's the obvious thing to do. The Bristol Channel's got the second largest tidal drop in the world, so a huge amount of water moving every day, quite regularly. So it was a bit of a surprise to find that there was a proposal for a large wind farm off of the island. So we were a bit disappointed to find that a place which is so environmentally sensitive as the Bristol Channel, and particularly so close to Lundy, was actually chosen for that.
As the Atlantic Array site is within Lundy's marine conservation zone, how do you think this will affect the marine life and Lundy itself?
You know, having managed Lundy for the last 40 years, and the Landmark Trust, along with the National Trust, have invested hugely to conserve and preserve such a special place. Clearly, we've got concerns that the construction of and the running of the wind farm will have a direct impact on Lundy, and we've got concerns over things such as noise during the construction phase and during the operating phase. People come here for peace and tranquility. You know, they come to escape, you know, development and industrialisation that you find on the mainland. And Lundy is a wild and remote place, and so it's a bit concerning to think that, you know, literally what's going to be a small factory will be possibly built on our doorstep. And we're led to understand that, you know, the wildlife here will be affected directly, and of course that's a concern for us.
After speaking to Derek, it was clear to see the effect that the wind farms would have upon Lundy, but he wanted to show me how they would visually impact the beautiful landscape.
So here we are on the south end of Lundy, and one of the best viewpoints on the island, looking north. And from here you can get an idea of how the impact of the wind farm will actually affect us from a visual perspective. And if you can imagine a line on the horizon and sweep all the way around as far as the eye can see, then this is the area where the proposed wind farm is going to be built. It's going to be quite a huge factory that we're going to be looking out on. And as you can see, we're looking out over a completely undisturbed and unspoilt seascape, which man has looked out from Lundy on for centuries.
After exploring the island, it's clear to see that its scenery, tranquility and wildlife are some of the main characteristics of Lundy. But with plans on the horizon for the Atlantic Array wind farm, it raises questions as what will become of Lundy's future. After visiting Lundy and seeing the devastating effects the wind farm could have, I travelled to Swindon, to the Atlantic Array headquarters, to find out more about their plans. Firstly, how did the plans for the Atlantic Array project come about?
Back in 2010, RWE and Power Renewables were awarded the development rights for the Bristol Channel Zone to build a wind farm that we're calling the Atlantic Array. The Bristol Channel Zone is one of 9 offshore zones that the Crown Estate put up for lease as part of their third round of offshore wind farm leasing. So since that date we've been looking at engineering and environmental studies of the area to decide where within the zone that we'll locate the wind farm.
Can you explain to the audience what the original plans were for the wind farm and why they've now changed?
We're still focusing on the central area of the zone, but there have been a number of changes in response to the community consultation we held last year and a result of the environmental studies that we've carried out, so we've got more information on the site now. Obviously we had a range of turbines in our envelope of 417 of maximum, and 188 of the larger turbines, so a smaller number. What we've done is reduce the maximum number of turbines down to 278, as you say, to reduce the visual density of the array should we opt to build out with smaller turbines. The capacity is still 1500 megawatts, but the reduction on the maximum number of turbines means that if we build out with anything less than a 6 megawatt turbine, we'll obviously not quite reach the 1500. So if it's 3.6 megawatt, for example, the capacity will be 1000 megawatts. But we've also reduced the extent that the wind farm occupies on the horizon from viewpoints in Devon, Lundy, and the Welsh coast.
The site you've suggested for the Atlantic Array wind farm is within Lundy's marine conservation zone. How does this affect the environmental impact assessment?
We've always been aware that there are special sites and habitats and species in that area that we need to be mindful of. So as part of our environmental assessment, we've been considering what the effects on the marine conservation zone will be. For example, looking at the potential effects of increased sediment in the water due to the construction activities that are taking place on the wind farm. Our modelling has shown that although there will be a temporary minor effect on some of those species very short term, and the species themselves should be tolerant to that kind of thing, because it's no greater than a storm event in the Bristol Channel, for example, which is quite a dynamic environment.
So how long is construction expected to take?
We anticipate that the wind farm will be built out over a 6-year period, likely to be in phases. So one area of the site will be built out, and there'll be potentially an interval between the next phase, but it's 6 years of construction.
How will this 6 years of construction affect the environment?
Our environmental impact assessment that we completed at the moment takes account of the environmental effects of both construction and operation of the wind farm. And one of the things that we need to assess is the effect of having those gaps between phases of construction. In some cases, it very much allows the environment to recover from the temporary impacts that have been caused during construction. So there are benefits, and there's also opportunities for monitoring what the effects have been as you move forward into the next phase. So you learn all the time from the construction activities, and you're sort of monitoring what's happening.
It seems that even though the Atlantic Array wind farm is a good source of renewable energy, it may come at the price of the environment. After speaking to both those on Lundy and at Atlantic Array, there was still one thing I was concerned about. The Marine Management Organisation, who are in charge of enforcing laws around a marine conservation zone, also support a lot of offshore development. But if they are concerned with more offshore development, but protecting marine conservation zones as well, then why have they given permission to Atlantic Array to build their wind farm at this specific site?
Let's ask the question of the marine organisation, the MMO, as to why they think that they would be able to, consent to planning permission for this when it is in such an obvious close proximity to the coastline of the UK. Yeah, I mean, I think the marine the marine management organisations, need to question what their, fundamental, objective for the whole of their conservation aims are in terms of this particular site. And clearly, the government has its agenda, and as a government or department, then one has to question, what their main aim in this whole strategy is.
The Marine Management Organisation refused to comment on the situation between Lundy Island and the Atlantic Array wind farm. As of June 6th, Atlantic Array and Lundy Island are waiting to hear back the results of the Environmental Impact Assessment, which will determine whether Atlantic Array can build their wind farm at this specific site. For now, the future is uncertain. Could another renewable energy source be harnessed in the Bristol Channel? Could Atlantic Array and Lundy compromise on this site? Or could the beautiful landscape of Lundy and its marine conservation zone be destroyed?
Sleep, don't visit, so I choke on the sun, and the days blur into one backs of my eyes, on the things I've never done. Sheets are swaying.